Hey everybody, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2015 Lance travel trailer, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the REDARC Manager30 battery management system. So it seems like as of lately, a lot of secondary type vehicles are becoming more and more popular, you know, whether it be a camper like this, a motorhome, a boat, whatever the case may be, a lot more people are getting into it. And I feel like one of the big reasons that holds true is because today's technology and everything, you know, staying inside of a camper or motorhome or really getting out on the water in that boat becomes much more comfortable because of all the amenities. And a lot of those are controlled by electricity. So one of the things that is really important to do is make sure your battery system is in good working order, because if you're at a place where you're relying on your batteries to generate all the power for all of your things inside, you want to make sure that they're going to work properly. So keeping them completely charged is not only going to make things a lot easier, you know, you can depend on them, but they're also going to be extended, the life of them. And that's because whenever you're properly charging a battery, it's going to last longer, you're going to get more cycles out of it, and it's going to save you a little bit of time in the long run. So what this system is capable of doing is super cool, actually. It's going to allow you to charge or maintain your battery or batteries 3 different ways, more or less. One of them is going to be through solar power. So if your motorhome, camper, trailer, whatever you have happens to have solar panels, then you can incorporate those through the system. And if the batteries need charging and you have enough sun, the system is going to use that solar energy. And what's cool is it's going to default to that energy first. So even if you're you know, maybe you're plugged into your 110 shore power, but it's a nice sunny day, it's going to utilize that solar power before the actual electricity. So, you know, really eco-friendly and everything like that, which is a nice touch, I think. The other way that it can charge or maintain those batteries is what I just mentioned, that shore power. So if you plug your camper in, plug your motorhome in at the campsite, whatever the case may be, you know, it's going to use that electricity to keep everything tip-top as far as your batteries are concerned. And last but not least is actually whenever you're towing, let's say this camper behind your vehicle, you can use the towed vehicle's electricity it creates through the charging system to send it back here, and then send that power, or some of it, whatever the system finds appropriate, to your camper's battery. So that's pretty cool. You know, whenever you're hooked up and you're driving to and from, you know, it's going to constantly be you know, helping those batteries reach full potential. That way when you get to where you're going, you know you're going to have a great start as far as the capacity of your batteries are concerned. And we're going to be able to keep track and monitor all that information and how our batteries are doing and how they're getting charged through our remote up here. So this thing's pretty cool. It's going to allow you to really check everything out and set up a bunch of things. So you just got kind of your time clock and your date and everything else. But one of the nice things that you can see is the input status. So right now we're in a garage, so we're not out in the sun. So you can see nothing really going on there. The sun image is blank. Same thing going on with the vehicle side. We're not towing down the road or connected to our vehicle, so that's blank. But we are plugged into our 110, our shore power. So you can see that is filled in black, and we have our voltage. So pretty straightforward. Chances are pretty good you're going to know what you're hooked up to. But that's just a good indicator of letting us know that, you know, we have some power going on. And this is where it's really neat. So this image here where it says BMS 1230, that's going to be our management system. And So we have power going into it, and we have power going out, approximately 16.3, 16.4 amps. Well, this light bulb image here is how much power we're using in the camper or whatever you have it hooked to. So in our case, we just have a couple of lights on, so we're drawing a little bit less than an amp. But the rest of that power is being sent to our battery, approximately 15.2 amps. So it's charging it up, maintaining it, whatever the case may be. And this is going to act as, for lack of a better term, more like a smart charger, if that makes sense. So it's going to send the appropriate voltage or amperage to the battery to extend the cycle and charge it properly. Because the way to properly charge a battery, you just don't throw 10 amps at it and let it sit. Will it work? Sure, but over time that's going to do more harm to the battery by not properly charging it. So this is going to send all that amperage properly to the batteries to get the full potential out of them and charge them to 100%. And that's not something you see all the time. A lot of other chargers won't get them all the way to 100%. And with this setup, they're going to bring them to that point and give you a bunch of extra time being able to use them. There's going to be a ton of different things you can do with your remote, and you know, I don't want to get into too much detail with them, but with that said, we'll kind of just go over some of the basics. What's going to be most commonly used. One of the menus is charging status, so it's going to tell you the stage of the battery, so absorb, the mode, which is touring, your battery voltage, so right now we have 14.2, and the battery temperature, which is currently 73 degrees. The battery temperature is cool because this system is going to have the ability to charge all the types of batteries in freezing temperatures. So it's going to do it properly. That way we have nothing to worry about. It's going to work with tons of different types of batteries. So I'll go to the other menu and you can check that out. So whenever you first set this up, you can choose gel batteries, AGM, lead acid, calcium, and lithium. The lithium is really important. Those are getting really popular now. They've come a long way, and a lot of people are choosing to go with those. And those obviously require, a little bit more of a specialized charger, but this one has you covered there. So you're going to have some remote settings. I mean, just about anything that you want to do, you're going to be able to. We're also going to have a more or less a battery charge screen, and right now it's calculating. But the way this is going to work, it takes a little bit of time to calculate right off the bat, because this is going to determine, the battery size that you enter in and set up. And once it kind of goes through that first charge cycle, then the system can determine what a full charge should be, because it don't really have anything to base off just yet. So once it kind of does its thing, and it'll give you how many hours or the allotted time until it's full. So that's kind of cool. You just kind of pop in here and check it. Okay, I got a few more hours, so we're good to go, whatever the case may be. Also gives you some graphs. We don't have a ton of information yet because we haven't really used this particular system on this particular camper a whole lot, but you can kind of check the charge per day and the history of it and stuff. So if you're curious about any of that information. And we can also see our solar information. So this is really interesting to me. It's going to give you your daily total and what you're currently getting. So that's kind of interesting to see. It's going to help, kind of maintain that solar energy. It's going to manage it. And then we're going to have some other things going on too. So you can do two different modes. So touring, so that's when you're out on the road, and storage, that's when you store it. One thing to look out for as far as the storage goes, you want to make sure that all loads are going to be disconnected from your house battery under charge. And that's because if you don't do that, might get a false reading and possibly cause damage to loads connected and things like that. So just something to keep in mind if you do plan on using this feature. Another setting I do think that is worth mentioning is the fact that we can more or less turn our loads off. So what I mean by that, you know, a lot of people, it's getting really popular to go completely off grid, and really important to keep your batteries maintained, because a lot of people have the batteries and maybe a solar panel, a couple solar panels to go off of. And so what you can do is set an alarm if the battery drops below a certain voltage or percentage, and you can also choose a load disconnect. So you know, you can set the voltage. So let's just say, you know, you don't want your batteries to go below 11.5 volts. If that happens and you continue to use everything, it's gonna, essentially what it's gonna do is cut everything off more or less until the batteries are juiced back up. So, you know, if you're in here not paying attention, voltage drops way low, you don't want your batteries to go flat and really struggle to get things going again. This will warn you, hey, you need to pay attention to what you're doing, turn some things off, let them charge back up a little bit longer. So this could be essentially a lifesaver, you know, if you're out in the middle of nowhere, potentially by yourself with not a ton of different resources. So something I thought was pretty neat. So at the end of the day, a really awesome system. You know, it does pretty much everything and a little bit more, especially compared to some of the other things that are available. You know, this one really goes above and beyond. You know, a lot of the other ones, they can do only one or two of those aspects and not all of them. So this gives you everything that you're going to need and want, really, all in one package. So it really makes it straightforward, especially once you start using it. Makes a lot more sense, and you can kind of put everything together. Now, as far as the installation goes, I'm not gonna lie, it is gonna take a little bit of time. Just there's a lot of wires to route and everything else. Once you kind of get everything laid out and really start thinking about it, it's relatively straightforward on how everything works. The most challenging part, though, like I said, is just trying to figure out how you're going to get everything where it needs to go. Something I do want to mention is the setup here. This particular kit is not going to come with a lot of the things that you need to get this completely installed. Here at eTrailer, we actually do offer a kit, an install kit, and that'll definitely get you started or pointed in the right direction as far as a lot of the things that you need. But I will say, be prepared to pick up some extra wiring, wiring clamps, and just some ins and outs to get this whole job done, because you know, every camper, whatever the case may be, is going to be set up a little bit different, and how you want everything to be positioned and stuff is going to be a little bit different. So just something to keep in mind. With all that being said, though, is as long as you stay focused and keep at it, really shouldn't have too bad of a time getting this all hooked up. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and do that together now. To your beginner installation, the first thing that we're going to do is start to mount up all of our main components. And the first one that we're going to focus on is the main unit. In our case, we're over here on the passenger side of our camper, here towards the front in this compartment. So here's how I mounted the main unit, and what you want to do is make sure that this is on something solid and out of the elements. So in this storage area was a perfect spot. This backing wall here is almost like a cardboard, so it's not very sturdy. So what I did was just use a piece of wood, secured it to our aluminum subfloor here, and that gave it a nice solid spot to mount up our unit. What you want to pay attention to is you want to make sure that you have the unit properly mounted. So there's some suggestions in the instructions on how you can kind of position this, and you also want to make sure that there's enough room below and above it, that way the unit can stay nice and cool. And so this is how I have mine mounted, and everything is set up correctly here. Now we can move on and mount up what's called the battery sensor, which is this component here. And we don't have a ton of space here, so I had to mount this on the outside of our frame. And what I've done is actually mounted this inside of a circuit box, if that makes sense. That way, you know, once we get everything together, we put the cover on it, and it'll just help keep everything clean and out of the elements. So this more or less just bolts right up. And while I was right here, I also mounted up a fuse holder that does not come included with the management system, but you can grab separately. So again, this just screws right down to the top of your frame rail. At this point, we can set up our remote monitor, and in our case, I chose to mount this inside. You definitely want it out of the elements. And I just put it right over our fridge here. Got a decently open space to work with. That way we can get our wires and everything ran here a little bit later on. But this is pretty straightforward. All you're gonna do is take this backing plate, you know, screw it in to where you want it positioned, and you will need to drill a hole here where the slot is. That way you're able to pass the wire through, but we'll get more to that here in a minute. But I just have this loosely installed. I suggest you do the same until everything's hooked up and we know it's working. But once that's done, this is more or less just going to kind of snap into place, and then we're going to be able to put a cover over it. Now, since we're right here, we can start to route some of our wiring. You're going to take one of the CAN cables here. That's just going to plug right into the back of your remote. And while I was right here, our customer already had solar panels installed, or a solar panel rather, and these white wires were the original ones. Okay, so you have this white wire as the ground, and the white wire with the red stripe, that's the power wire for the solar panel. And I extended those wires using appropriately sized wiring. Just connected them using heat shrink type buck connectors. And so these are all going to get routed to our main unit. Okay, so solar panel wire as well as the CAN cable. What I did is just run it through this opening, and keep in mind it's going to be a little tricky to see here, but I drilled a small hole at the very top of this storage compartment, routed them along, and simply just followed this bundle of wire down. Now keep in mind there was you know, little covers here that you may have to remove to gain access to that. They're not really a big deal. But all the wires that we ran come straight down. I drilled another opening there in the bottom of this cabinet. That's where they run down into this opening and towards the front of our camper. And this is where they come out. All right, so we're in our storage compartment again, where our main unit is located. So here's the CAN cable and our 2 solar panel cables. And I just routed these up along through here, all the way over to the far side of the unit there. And what I've done is the red and black wire, I actually just drilled a small hole in that cardboard backing, pushed them through there and out to the other side, which we'll get to in a minute. The CAN cable simply just runs behind our wooden mount over to the left side of our unit where everything gets plugged in. So on this side of our unit, the CAN cable gets plugged into this slot here, so it simply just pushes right in. And the red solar panel cable, which is this one here, that gets plugged into that slot. Now, just to make the install a little bit easier, I just kind of wrote with a Sharpie on what does what. So, you know, this slot I have an S for solar, and the way these work is You're just gonna have a flathead screw in here. You can loosen that up, strip the wire back, push it in, and tighten it down. Now, as far as the black solar panel wire is concerned, that's going to continue to get routed towards the front of our vehicle. That way we can get it hooked up to our ground post, which is located on the tongue of our trailer. So now moving back to that black solar panel wire, okay, that I fed in behind this little cardboard face here. As I said, the power wire came to our unit, and the black ground wire will need to go outside. With that said, I'll show you how I got that wire out there, and any of the wires from this point on that we run from the outside to our unit here, they're essentially going to take the same exact path and the same technique to get them in. So that said, in our case, we had a cutout here, and you're not going to be able to see this from in here, but if you remove this small panel, you're kind of able to reach your hand back there and work with some of the wires. This goes right to the very front of our trailer on the outside, so let's go ahead and move out there and check that out. So here at the front of our trailer, you can see we have several wires going up into that storage compartment where main unit is mounted. And what I did with these is just drilled a hole of the appropriate size to get our wire through and ran it that way. So this black one here, that's the solar panel ground, and I simply just routed that down under our trailer and mounted that up to the ground post here on this left hand side. Now, something I want to mention, essentially, other than the ones that we'll talk about in a minute, all of the grounds for this system and everything else, you want to make sure to mount to this stud. So that's something I just wanted to mention, but we'll kind of get to that and discuss it in just a moment. So now that we covered, you know, where we have our solar panel wire grounded, figured you might as well go over everything that's going on here since we're kind of talking about it. We'll start with this wire here. All right, and that's going to go to this negative side here on our battery monitor. And this is going to be the only wire that gets connected to this post. All right, and so that wire is just going to go down under the frame and get routed up. And that's going to get connected to the negative battery terminal. So then moving back to this post, one of the wires is going to be this one here, this larger gauge wire. All right, so you're going to connect that to that post, and this is simply just going to get grounded to the trailer frame. So that wire runs up here. I drilled a hole in the frame. You know, you want to make sure that the paint is removed and you got bare metal so everything's nice and clean, and just nut and bolted it to the chassis, and that's going to provide us with that chassis ground. This white wire here, all right, that was the original ground wire that went to our battery originally before any of this stuff was on. So like I said, the way your trailer is set up now, or camper rather, you're going to take the wire that goes to that negative post originally and also put it on this one here. So essentially all the grounds, more or less. That leaves us with two more wires. We're going to have this one here and this one here. We'll focus on this one first. This one gets connected, and this is going to get routed up towards the front of our camper. You can see I just ran it up along through here, and that's going to be the negative wire for our Anderson plug, which will eventually get plugged into your, your tow vehicle. So that just plugs right into there. So now that that one is covered, we can move back to the area where we have all of our grounds, but since we're right here, might as well just go over this red wire. So the red wire that comes from your Anderson plug, that's just going to follow that same path, kind of down and underneath of our chassis here, and it is going to come out right here and go up inside of our storage area where we have our main unit mounted. With that said, the last ground wire that we have is going to get connected to the post, and this is also going to get routed up into our storage area too, where the main unit is. That's not it though. We might as well route all of our wires at the same time. All right, so one of them, what you're going to do, so we have, I'll just kind of give a rundown here. So we're going to have our black solar power wire, the thick red wire here that comes from our Anderson plug. We're going to have the ground wire that's coming from our battery monitor. We're going to have this CAN wire too, all right? And this CAN wire that actually comes out of our battery monitor, okay? So that's just pre-attached in there. That goes down and again into the compartment. That leaves us with one more thick red wire, which is this one here. All right, so that goes up in there. What you're gonna do is run that to a fuse holder. When you do this fuse holder, try to get it, you know, as close as possible to the battery. Comes through that fuse and gets routed up to the positive battery terminal. Now I want to mention these physical connections up here at your battery. You know, you want to leave disconnected until you have everything hooked up. All right, so we have everything hooked up. That's why I put these on, but that's something you'd want to do at the very end. This wire here, that's the original positive battery wire. So just how we talked about that white ground wire that was originally here, this is the same deal. This one will get hooked back up to the positive battery terminal, and then that leaves the temperature sensor, which is this here. That'll get to the positive battery terminal as well, and this just runs right down to our battery monitor and comes right out. It's already connected inside, but that's it right there. So now back here at our main unit, as I mentioned, all of those wires that we ran in, we can now get them hooked up. The CAN wire right here that comes from our battery sensor just gets plugged right in. Then we can focus on all these. All right, so this slot number 1, where I have this positive sign, that's going to be the red wire here that goes to the battery on the front of our camper that has a fuse in it. Number 3, where I have the negative sign, that's going to be the black wire that runs to our battery sensor and gets grounded. We already hooked this one up, slot number 5 for the solar panel, and that leaves us with slot number 6. And what that's going to be is the wire that runs to our Anderson plug there at the front, where we can plug it into our vehicle whenever we're towing it. So that leaves us with 2 empty slots, and we're not going to be using them, but I figured I'd kind of touch base on what they will do. Slot number 2 there, which I have labeled L, that's going to be for load, and so you can use that to essentially keep any accessories on, if that makes sense. So like a refrigerator, for example, if you wanted to leave it on and everything else off, that's where you would utilize that. And you can always check your instructions for more information if that's something that you're interested in doing. This one here, slot number 4, that's going to be ignition. I have it labeled I. It's an ignition trigger, and more times than not, That's something that you're not going to have to worry about hooking up. Essentially, what that is going to do is work with vehicles that have a variable voltage alternator. And what that's going to do is trigger the DC input. So if your vehicle has that alternator, again, you can refer to your instructions for a little bit more information as far as this is concerned. Now if we look on the other side of our main unit here, we're going to have a plug, and this is going to be the main AC input plug. So you're just going to push that cable into the slot, and this wire is going to have to get routed over to an outlet. That way we can plug it in. So the AC main input wire, I just routed along the panel here up top. I did use some wire clamps here along the way to keep everything secured. Those aren't included, but you can grab them here at eTrailer. And I simply just dropped it right down to our outlet and plugged it in. Now I want to mention, if you don't have an outlet within reach of your cord that you can utilize, you are going to have to add one, and chances are pretty good that's going to be the case. That's exactly what I did. The receptacle, the box and the cover, nothing like that comes with it, so you may have to pick that up separately if that's the case, and wire in that outlet. If you're not very comfortable with AC and electrical work that comes along with it, I would definitely recommend hiring an electrician to get this installed for you, just to be on the safe side. But if you got one there or already plan on putting one in, pretty straightforward. We're just going to plug that right into the receptacle. So now that we have essentially everything hooked up here on the camper side, all the wiring, everything set up how we need it to be, let's talk a little bit more about this Anderson plug. All right, so on the camper side, it's complete. It runs to where it needs to go, but this is going to get plugged into another Anderson type connector on the back of your vehicle. So you are going to have to set the vehicle side up. With that being said though, let's go outside to our vehicle and just show you how we did that. That way you can get it done on your vehicle. So we're out here on our vehicle that we're going to be using to pull our camper, and show you how we got the side of the Anderson connectors hooked up. Now keep in mind, every vehicle is going to be a little bit different as far as how you're going to mount up the components and route the wires and everything like that, but generally speaking, they're all going to be hooked up the same, all the physical connections and everything like that. You're going to have a power wire that goes to your positive battery terminal. All right, and that's going to get routed over to a fuse holder. That way it'll be fuse protected. Then it's going to go down underneath your vehicle. While we're doing that, you want to take the black ground wire, hook that to the negative side of your battery terminal, and you're going to route both of those wires, the ground as well as the positive, to the underside of your vehicle. That way we can run it all the way to the very back where we can mount up our connector plug. Something that I do want to mention, regardless on what vehicle you're installing this on, whenever you're routing those wires, you definitely want to make sure that they're secure, so you can use some zip ties to do that. And you want to avoid any hot or moving parts. That way the wires don't get damaged and we don't have to worry about anything bad happening. So once you route those wires all the way to the back of your vehicle, you want to mount up your plug in an accessible location that makes sense. That way you can plug the camper side directly in and connect the two together. With everything hooked up now, we can come back to our remote here, and it's gonna prompt you to choose your battery setup. So you got your gel, AGM, lead acid, calcium, lithium, and so you're gonna choose the one that's appropriate. In our case, it's AGM, and then it's going to prompt you how many amp hours your battery is. So we have one single battery. It's rated for 105 amp hours, so that's what we're going with. If you have several batteries, you're just going to take those ratings, add them together, and choose what's appropriate. So that's how you get that set up. You'll confirm it, and that's really all there is to it as far as the battery setup goes. With that said, what we can do now is get to our main screen and test our system out to make sure that it is working. So if we work through our menu, what we're going to see is the sun for our solar energy, the cord here for shore power, and our vehicle. So what we can do right now, it's saying that we have some solar energy. What we're going to do is test the other two by plugging in to shore power, and then we can plug our vehicle into and see if everything works right. So I went ahead and plugged into power, and you can see this bar here went to a solid color. I'm showing 112 volts, so we're plugged into our 110. So we know it's seeing the voltage there, but is it actually affecting our battery? So if you scroll down to the output status, you can see our battery management system is receiving that energy, and it is putting out approximately 20.4 amps to our battery. So it is indeed charging our battery as we speak. So to test out to make sure that our vehicle side is working correctly, we're going to take our Anderson plugs, plug them in, make sure the vehicle is running, then we can go inside, look at our remote, and make sure everything checks out. So with our camper plugged into our vehicle running through the Anderson plug, you can see the car emoji. The bar is a solid color, so we know it's seeing the power. And then if we look through here, the output status, so our BMS is receiving that power and putting out approximately 17-ish amps to the camper's battery, so we know it's doing its job correctly. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the REDARC Manager30 battery management system on our 2015 Lance travel trailer.